Hi, I'm Paul Smith, and today I've decided to bring in to discuss housing and development with another Paul who has got even less hair than me, so that we've not really been suffering with the lockdown hair problem that some people have had. Paul is from LandAid, and we'll be exploring during this session both a bit about Paul's background and more importantly about LandAid and what it does, and also how you might be able to get involved in it. So, hello, Paul. How are you today?
I'm doing very well indeed, Paul, and yeah, we've managed to get through the last the last year or so without any particular concern about barbers. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I think we both probably have a bit of an eyebrow problem, but we'll brush over that.
Well, I'd say we don't have an eyebrow problem, but my wife would probably disagree.
Mm-hmm. So, firstly, could you tell us what LandAid is, a little bit about its history, its objectives, and its achievements?
Absolutely. So, in a nutshell, LandAid is an unusual charity. We were set up about 35 years ago by sort of leading luminaries within the property industry. At the time, very much around the same mood as LiveAid and BandAid, hence the name. But inspired by that sort of desire to try and do something as an industry, as opposed to just individual companies, to give something back. And in the dim and distant past, it was very much about raising money for, I think originally for the Horn of Africa. But there was always an interest in working with young people, and as the years went on, the focus became young people in this country. And the charity was all very small. It was very sort of laid back, run by purely by volunteers at the time. 10 years in, 15 years in, they decided they wanted to become a bit more professional, a bit more focused, became more of a formal charity. And so the focus of the organisation changed as well. So focus on UK, focus on young people, focus on providing funds to charities who were doing some great stuff around the UK. I joined about 6 years ago, and I brought a background of charity management, charity leadership, but I didn't know very much about the property industry at all, particularly. So I brought an interest in what the charity sector could do, and an interest in what business could do. And fairly shortly after I started, I thought, there is an opportunity to bring this extraordinary industry sector together to focus on one problem particularly, and to see whether there was an opportunity to tackle and address that. And the problem that I felt we had the greatest chance to do something for and about was youth homelessness. So, as I said, the charity now works exclusively with the UK property industry, primarily commercial real estate, and the whole gamut. So, we're really involved in planning, investment, development, logistics, the whole kit and caboodle, and tries to bring the interest that a huge number of people within the industry have about social impact, about the communities in which they work, develop, and serve. But to try and focus it on achieving some real, tangible, lasting change, and not just the sort of social impact that people often want to see on their doorstep, around a project that they're working on. So it's a bigger, bolder ambition. And interestingly, today, 29th of April, we've launched our next 3-year ambition. And a new sort of fundraising campaign, but perhaps we'll come on to that in a bit.
I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about that more later, Paul. I was interested. I mean, you said a little bit about your background. I went on to the dating app for the professional sector called LinkedIn, just to check out your CV, and you've worked for a number of various charities over your career. I think one of them with a particular link to homelessness, which was Centrepoint, the charity, not the tower block.
Not the tower block.
Yeah, I just wondered what drew you to LandAid.
Well, I have been working as a deputy chief executive for about 5 or 6 years in a very different sector. I've been working in mental health and learning disability advocacy. And I was heavily involved in bid writing and submitting tenders. And I was looking for a new opportunity. I'd applied for various jobs in adult social care, and either I wasn't getting the interviews at all, or I was getting interviews, but I was palpably the fourth of four, and I just wasn't getting anywhere. Then I saw this job for a charity I had never heard of before, and had a look at it, and I thought, oh, it seems a sort of bit interesting. I'm not entirely sure. My wife, who is maybe wrong about eyebrows, but was right about the job, said, look, I think you should have a go for it. And I applied, and I got it. What interested me at the time was, having worked in part of the charity sector for most of my life, but either depended on charitable grants or local authority or national contracts. This was a charity that depended entirely on corporate philanthropy. And I was intrigued to see what could be done with that. I had worked with people in the private sector enough to know that the common and trite views that some people have about bad business are more often than not undermined by the extraordinary creativity, enthusiasm, passion, social activism in many cases of many in business, particularly in social enterprise and startups. And I thought, if I can find a way of trying to tap that energy, that creativity, and that wealth to social action, that would be interesting. So it was very much a personal challenge. It was something I didn't know very much about. And looking at the job description now, you think about all the things on the job description that you can do. Is this a job for me? Can I do that? I was looking through the job description, and I didn't have any experience in community fundraising. I didn't have any experience of corporate fundraising. I didn't have any experience of fundraising events of any description at all. So I was spectacularly underqualified. However, clearly they were looking for somebody who was bored to be able to do the job, and maybe that was enough. But I think in the end, it was really a proposition that I put forward. I thought, if we can harness enough of the goodwill within business to social action, we can genuinely achieve some extraordinary things, and so it has proved.
And it sounds like that you feel that you've made quite a lot of change to the organisation. It's developed in your period of leadership. Is there anything in particular that you would identify as being a significant change? I think I've seen you somewhere talk about how it was quite an interesting challenge just to get the then board of trustees to look at youth homelessness as its charitable objective rather than something more general.
It was, and so what have been the big things? It's always a bit difficult as a chief executive to know what is your fault. I mean, it's your fault when something goes badly wrong. Mm-hmm. But when you're looking back and seeing hopefully the difference you've made, I think there are a couple of things. I think first, it was that decision to focus on youth homelessness, and it was a journey. We had a conversation with the trustees. We put a lot of evidence forward. Not everybody was in favour, but we got everybody there in the end. And since then, the board has been remarkably supportive, and in my experience, the best board I think I've ever worked with. I think it's been an extraordinary board. So I think the achievements that I've had, I can put my flag on. One is making that change. If I'm honest, I think the other changes are as a result of having brought some really great people into the team, and it's having given them the scope, or delegated or left them to do stuff that they wanted to do, that has made the difference. And I enjoy taking credit when I can for some of the stuff that they do, but it is very much down to them. So I have a small but very, very good team who work incredibly hard and who make some of the more harebrained ideas and requests that I come up with from time to time either work really well or quietly just allow them to be forgotten so that they don't cause too much damage.
Yeah, I mean, being in a chief exec role myself, I can very much reflect that. I mean, I feel very blessed that I've got a really strong team, which means that I can take all sorts of credit for the wonderful things that they do, but also that they can stop me doing things that are completely mad, which is also an important role of the team below to say, are you really going to do that?
I think you're right. I think it's an interesting relationship between the board and your executive team, and there's it's like flying kites. You want to be able to fly to try all sorts of new things. Your executive team is desperately trying to avoid you breaking the organisation with your enthusiastic, harebrained ideas. And the board is desperately trying to protect the reputation of the organisation and its fiduciary responsibilities and so on from you. So there's a sweet spot where you get the most extraordinary, talented people on your board who can help you be the chief executive that you want, and a great executive who can help you make the organisation work and stop you breaking things.
Absolutely. So can you say a little bit more about the organisations that are actively involved in LandAid, including obviously the organisations represented on your trustee body that you've talked about? Who are the leaders in the sector that have really stepped up and made LandAid successful?
It's a really good question. The board has been important and is, and we generate a huge amount of support through our board. But we are supported pretty actively by 200 property companies around the country. We have a bunch of companies that are strategic partners. They are larger donors to our work and much more engaged. And then we have a network of foundation partners. There's about 60 or 70 foundation partners. And then a whole array of supporter companies, all of whom are committed to our mission and supporting us in one way or another. But the breadth of organisations that support us is huge. So from some of the large agencies, Knight Frank, Savills, JLL, and CBRE, through to some of the great developers across all sectors. So, Landsec, British Land, Helical. We've got some amazing investors behind us: Aviva, LNG, M&G. And then, sort of specialist sectors. I mean, some of which are huge in their own right. Seagrow's behind us, Mace in the construction sector, Westfield is behind us. So we can carry on sort of spooling names off. What's powerful about this is that irrespective of the particular sector that people are working in and the particular skill sets that they bring, these are businesses that, notwithstanding their own corporate social responsibility, notwithstanding their own sort of ESG responsibilities and interests, see value in being part of an industry-wide collective to try and achieve some particular thing. And I think one of the challenges that we have at the moment in terms of the role that business has in achieving social change and the whole conversation around social impact and social value and so on that we're all sort of getting tied up in is it is challenging enough to try and capture the social impact that we all have. But the real challenge is, what is the change that we are trying to achieve through the social impact and social value that we deliver? And while there are so many different areas in which companies legitimately want to be concerned in or need to be concerned about, what we've been successful in is putting a proposition to the industry that there is this one problem that over the next however many years it will be, we need to work to and can work to. So there's a large number of companies supporting us, and in many and varied ways, both through financial donation and through fundraising events, but also through pro bono as well. Companies are wanting to find some way in which they can help deliver that goal that we've set ourselves.
So, I mean, Paul, I first met you when you were looking at setting up a regional board for the southwest of England, centred on Bristol. Can you talk about that regional structure you have?
Sure. One of the problems I guess many companies, many businesses, many charities experience is being perceived to be, if their head office is in London, perceived to be London-centric. Our grants, the money we raise, we give out as grants to charities, and we've always given more out to regions and the nations in the country than we have to London, but we were still perceived as being London-centric. And there were two problems that raised. One is it disengaged people. If they thought that we were London-centric and they were based in Birmingham or Bristol or Manchester or wherever, they just said, well, it's not something for me. But the other problem is there are huge and wonderful businesses working all around the country that we were missing out on because they didn't feel that they had a stake in what we were doing. So a couple of years ago, we sat down and talked to prominent property business leaders in a number of cities, including Bristol, to see whether we could set up regional boards that would both promote our mission, help us fundraise, and help get the word out. And we've done that very successfully. We now have regional boards in Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Bristol, and Cambridge. What is interesting about those boards, now that they're sort of beginning to really get established, is they are getting the word out. They are helping to fundraise. They're putting on some great events, and they're supporting in our national events as well. But the really interesting part is the creative and ingenious way in which each of those boards is engaging with the problem of youth homelessness in their regions, in their localities, and trying to come up with solutions that work for those areas. So, Bristol has its own particular flavour. There are particular charities that are working there. The city has a particular approach. And as a consequence, the regional board has evolved in a way that dovetails to, I hope, well, alongside those sort of strategic pillars. Similarly, the work we're doing in Birmingham and the West Midlands is different. There's a very different sort of superstructure of providers and partners there as well. So each of those regional boards has set up, each of them has a different mix of professionals representing some of the great agencies, developers, investors in that area. And each of them has a sort of target, both to engage people, particularly young people in the industry, to raise money for some of the projects we're working on, but increasingly to identify a big project in a particular area and help get that project delivered in a way that few others could. And this is the trick. What is it that we can find that the industry itself can do that is perhaps unique to the industry by virtue of its ability to work together, its understanding and appreciation of real estate that few others could do, or it would just be very expensive and time consuming.
I mean, there's an elephant in the room, isn't there? Or in our case, there's a cat in the room, which is the issue of philanthropy versus, direct provision. And one of the questions I'm sure might be in some people's mind watching this or thinking about LandAid's activity is, wouldn't it be better if developers just built more affordable housing and stopped gaming the viability system within planning, rather than setting up a charity to fill the gaps that have partly been created by their own actions in terms of not providing affordable housing within development schemes? Now, obviously, many of your developers are not in the housing industry; they're in other parts of the property industry. But I just wonder how you would respond to that challenge.
It's a very good challenge. The issue of planning, I'm not going to sort of dive into that, partly because it's not an area of huge expertise, but it's clear that there are all sorts of challenges there, and some would argue, well, there's a political framework around planning, and if that were calibrated slightly differently, it would lead to sort of different results. But I don't think many people that we're working with would in any shape or form contest the proposition that the housing system in this country is failing us, and that there is a need for much greater, not just affordable housing, but social housing as well. And I think there's a real interest, an interesting move, perhaps, particularly from the institutional investor sector, recognising the opportunity and role for much more affordable housing, long-term housing solutions, which we're seeing. As you say, the majority of our supporters come from commercial real estate, industrial logistics, retail, and commercial, and so on. So their connection with the debate around social housing in the country tends to be more arm's length. But we're also seeing some of the agents who do have really strong areas of expertise in the residential sector, developing real expertise and positions around social housing, around affordability, around sustainability, and sort of leading positions there, which is also interesting. So it may be that things are changing. However, it doesn't take away from the fact that there is always a challenge around philanthropy and the role of charity, and it goes to the heart of any charitable endeavour. Whichever way you look at it, in our country, charity has evolved to fill needs that haven't been met or haven't been met well enough through other routes, most of which are the expectation that we have that the state does things, or the expectation we had that the state does things. So charity steps in, identifies communities who are perhaps being left behind, needs that aren't being met, and tries to find ways of solving those problems. Now, business generally, rather than property specifically, but business generally, is increasingly being looked to, rightly, to address some of the consequences of commercial activity, and we see this particularly through sustainability and the environmental agenda. But there is an increasing awareness, I think, amongst a lot of businesses that their customers, their shareholders, their staff, their new talent are all looking at them and saying, well, if I'm going to put my money into or my career into a company, I want it to be a company that is doing some good as well as just turning a profit. And we're seeing more businesses, certainly in our sector, investing in ESG leads, sustainability leads, in a way that certainly happened 5 years ago, but not to the extent that it's happening now. And there are some fascinating conversations going on within the sector about the S in ESG. There is not enough clarity there. We're struggling. It is a really difficult area to look at. But the charitable opportunity, the charitable endeavour, provides a scope for the industry to get behind something that will deliver tangible impact, something that is measurable, meaningful, leaves a legacy that people can feel proud about and can do. There are other levers that others can pull to address business practice more generally, but almost without exception, in fact, I can't think of an exception, businesses that support us have supported us because our mission aligns with the social values that they have as well. So there's a sense in which it's a community of the willing and the on board.
And it's a community, not a coalition. But
yes,
do you see in any way that the role of LandAid is also to educate its members about homelessness and its consequences? I mean, and coming back to this point about affordable housing, certainly in the Southwest, Gavin Bridge, who was, I don't know if he still is, but was chair of the regional board, was also an advocate of ensuring that affordable housing is included in private developments.
Yes, and he was also very interested, I know he is very interested, in ensuring that we take opportunities to raise awareness of the real lived experience of people who may find themselves sleeping rough or homelessness. I remember him talking about the way in which we could support facilities management teams, people who are looking after commercial estates, certainly after hours and so on, to try and raise people's awareness and understanding and appreciation of the problems that people who might be sleeping rough could experience, to avoid really often unpleasantness. Let's just think of it as unpleasantness between those staff and people sleeping rough. And I just thought that was a really smart move. I think you're right. There is a real need around education. It goes to the heart of what I think charities should do. This is about building bridges, and this is one of the things that really interests me about my role. We're supported by businesses who give a damn. They, from the boardroom to the postroom, colleagues within most of those businesses want to do good. They will be concerned about what they see. They will be concerned about the rise in rough sleeping. They'll be concerned about all sorts of things that they can see going wrong, but they won't necessarily have the information to understand the issues or the language to understand them or explore them better. And I think we do have a role, and I'm not sure we always get it right, to help people working in business who are time poor to understand the experiences of people who may not live very far away from them, but whose life chances are so profoundly different. I mentioned earlier on that we were launching our new ambition this morning. A director of operations from a national youth homelessness charity, DePaul UK, was talking, Alexia Murphy. And you could see through the questions that were coming back how grateful people were for the opportunity to hear from somebody who looked like them, sounded like them, but had a deep and very particular insight into this world that they have a concern about but don't understand.
And coming back more directly to the activities that LandAid supports and uses for fundraising, which sort of things have been most successful for you? And also, we've talked a lot about fundraising. We haven't talked about the amount that you tend to raise. I just wondered if you could give us some sense of what the quantum is that you raise each year and that you aim to raise. And sorry, this is quite a long question, but the other thing is that again, I know from my experience in Bristol is that it's not just about people going out and doing wacky things and raising money. It's also about people using professional skills they've got pro bono to help deliver projects. So maybe
it is
a bit about that as well.
It is. You're absolutely right. So, so the last couple of years we've raised nearly £3 million each year. This year, obviously, with COVID, we expected to have a really massive dip in income and prepared accordingly. As it happens, we've done far better than we feared. But what I would say is, I think the income sort of totem pole is sort of secondary, really. It's a really easy measure of some success. But what it doesn't measure really is the impact that we're seeking to have. And this comes back to your point about volunteering and the use of expertise as well. So to put it in context for folks, we said that 3.5-4 years ago, over the next 3 years, ending in 2020, we would provide through our fundraising 450 homes for young people. For a variety of reasons, partly because we're just brilliant, we smashed that target and we delivered 520 homes in the same period. We did different things, we cut the cloth in different ways. I think that's a better measure of our success than whether we made 3 million or 4 million or whatever. So the first thing is, I think the impact is important, and our impact has gone up and up. We've now launched our new ambition, and over the next 3 years we want to provide 1,000 homes, so double what we did over the previous 3 years. You mentioned pro bono, and you've talked about Bristol. One of the most exciting projects that we're involved in is supporting the East Street News project, which is an initiative in Bristol to renovate a pretty derelict building in Bedminster, where the City Council has donated the freehold for a period, I think 21 years or so, at peppercorn rent. But the industry has pulled together to provide, on a pro bono basis, a pretty substantial amount of the labour and product needed to renovate that building. And there'll be some grant top up. But that's what I mean when I talk about the fact that it isn't just about fundraising. And it is about the industry putting together. Thousands of hours have gone into that project, and they've all been donated by large companies, small companies, but people working within Bristol who see young people on the streets and would rather not. So, our income is about 3 million. We're planning to provide about 1,000 homes over the next 3 years. One of the routes that we're planning to do that is through, and we're exploring at the moment, whether there's scope to create a social investment fund specifically around youth homelessness, whether and how we might work more strategically with a number of local authorities to deliver that fund. But that's the sort of initiative where we should be able to achieve massive impact if we can get it right.
We'll come on to that in a second. I must admit, one of my bugbears was when organisations would send a group of accountants or lawyers out to paint somebody's community building, when actually what would really help that community organisation was either some good financial support or legal advice, which is what those people are absolutely great at. But of course, very often what they wanted to do was something that wasn't their normal day job. And I think the fact that you're mobilising people to use their skills rather than just to jump out of aeroplanes or whatever it is that people from LandAid do, to actually make projects to help them be delivered, I think is incredibly important. And we'd like to see more organisations taking that sort of approach.
It is, and I remember talking to some charities right at the beginning of my time at LandAid, and we were asking them about about volunteering, because every business we spoke to said, "Oh, we'd like to go do some volunteering. We'd like to help out. It'd be great team building exercise and so on." And when we talk to charities, they just say, enough of the team building exercise. Fine, go off and knock trees down and so on, but don't take out your team exercising stuff on us. And one charity said, look, we had a couple of people come in from one business, they were all accountants or something. They came in and they painted our day centre, and they did such a rubbish job that we had to get people in to come and paint it properly afterwards. It's just not worth it. So when we go around and talk to businesses now, we say, look, you might think that your cutting in is God's gift, but generally speaking, you're crap at painting and decorating and digging ditches and plastering. Don't do it. If, however, you're brilliant at planning advice, if you're brilliant at property advice or advising on leases, if you're brilliant at digital modelling or whatever it might be, those are the sorts of skills that can save loads of money. So alongside our ambition to provide 1,000 homes, we also plan within 3 years to be brokering £1 million worth of professional advice of all description from companies within the property sector a year. So at the moment, we're probably about £250,000 worth of professional advice. So that's a very significant growth.
Have we left anything unsaid about your future plans that you would like to share with us?
Well, a year ago, if you'd asked, what are your future plans, I'd have said, well, we were just about to launch our strategy and COVID's come along and the world's turned upside down. And I've got no idea what's going to happen. And I think alongside business leaders, we had no sense of what the future was going to hold, not just for our organisations, but for our society. I'm not sure we yet know what the future is for our society. I hope that the rhetoric around Build Back Better is being taken seriously, and there's some great conversations going on, I know. But I am absolutely certain that the future of LandAid is brighter than it looked a little while ago. It is certainly brighter than it was 5 years ago. We've got a very bold proposition for our industry, and there's an opportunity for the industry to really address the misgivings, the concern, the poor reputation that we know we are held by many, and to do something different. And I'm delighted to be able to offer that opportunity, but only because the problem of youth homelessness is just a disgrace. It is an absolute disgrace. It is absolutely not. It is absolutely unavoidable. It is absolutely avoidable, and this industry can make a difference. So yeah, I feel quite excited and emboldened about the future in a way that perhaps I wouldn't have done before.
Which is fantastic. And I guess the obvious sort of final question, Paul, is some people may be watching this and they've been absolutely infused by your passion and your vision, and they want to get involved in LandAid activities and supporting you in delivering those 1,000 homes for young people who otherwise would be homeless. How do they get involved? How do they engage with your organisation?
In the first instance, LandAid.org. Simple as that. We've got a great team at the other side who will pick up any inquiries. They'll field them to me, to my deputy chief executive, our partnerships team. We can sit down and talk with any company working in the sector to work out what would work for you. Because we work so closely with the sector, we tailor the sort of relationships we have in a way that many charities can't. We understand different sizes, different natures of businesses, different niches. So get in touch, landaid.org, and we'll find a way in which you can help us achieve our mission.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for giving us some of your time today.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
It's been a real pleasure to talk to you yet again. I always find you incredibly inspiring, and I'm sure many of the people listening to you today or now, or whatever the phrase is you use on the video blogs, will also be infused, and I hope that this leads to more organisations getting involved in helping you to deliver the vision that you've outlined. Thank you very much.
Thank you.